So I want to so I want to thank you all so much for joining. My name is Liz McGoey. I am on the HR team and also a co-lead on our DE&I Ambassador Network. So again, welcome and thank you so much for participating in today's DE&I education event, The Value of Authenticity in the Workplace, with our partners at West. If you're interested in becoming a member of West, please visit the West website and use the membership code IPSIN. There is also a plug in the chat that gives you directions on exactly how to sign up. So throughout the next hour, we are going to hear from Clara Angelina Diaz Anderson, an award-winning bilingual certified executive leadership coach, business advisor, consultant, master coach trainer, international speaker, and published author. So in this workshop, we're going to learn about what it means to be authentic in the workplace, strategies to foster a culture that embraces authenticity, and why it's important that leaders create environments where Latinos and others can be themselves. At the end of today's session, if you would like to continue the conversation, Clara will be happy to invite you to a 30-minute chat to do so. So with that, I'm thrilled to turn things over to Clara Angelina Diaz Anderson.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you so much, Jamie, for bringing me on. Thank you, West, and thank you, everyone, for being here present for this conversation. While I'm going to be providing you with a lot of information today, I really want to make this interactive. So to start off, I would really love to hear from all of you. I'll be asking you questions throughout, asking you to please participate in the chat. So I would first love to hear from all of you. Where are you joining us from? I know everyone is, working in office or working from home. So share with us, are you working from your office? Are you working from home? In what towns are you joining us from? I would love to put a visual to where you are all joining us from. So I see, wow, London, New Jersey, Annapolis, Minneapolis, Texas, Cambridge. Oh my goodness. Connecticut, London, Montana. Love it. So I can visualize like little pings all through like the globe. Northborough. So I personally live in the South Shore of Massachusetts in a town called Raynham. So all for your visual pleasure. I'm really excited to be with you all today to have this conversation about authenticity in the workplace. And before I share my screen, my first question to all of you is going to be, what does authenticity mean to you? When you hear of the word authenticity in the workplace, like what's the first word or the first feeling that comes up for you? So if you would share that with me on the chat, being genuine, thank you. Feel lies, yes. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you sharing humility, honest and transparent, being yourself, sincerity. Beautiful. Thank you. Courage. Anyone else? Like, as we continue the conversation, please feel free to share what comes up for you, and if you have any questions in the chat. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. And then Elizabeth, if I can just get a thumbs up that we're good, we can see it. So my work, as Elizabeth was sharing, is really to drive the conversation of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and I do that through a few different ways. I do that through coaching. I do that through entrepreneurship and through business advising and making sure that individuals who would normally be overlooked in the workplace or in the entrepreneurial world actually have a voice and are reaching their maximum potential. I love doing this work. And so today, what we're going to be covering is really after I had a conversation with a few folks at Ipsen who, I asked, like, what do you really want to learn in this conversation? They gave me the following questions. So what we'll cover today is, what is authenticity in the workplace? What is that? What does it look like? How can I personally be more authentic? How is my uniqueness and differences valuable in the workplace? And as we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and I understand this is part of the reason for this conversation, also is, what is what is the Latinx experience with authenticity in the workplace? And I have some really interesting data to share with you on that. The other question that we'll be addressing today is, what can I do to promote a more authentic workplace? How can we create a more inclusive culture where people can be their authentic selves? And is there a difference in how different generations view authenticity in the workplace? So, as you all said, when you think of authenticity, you think of humility, courage, honesty, being real, lies, sincerity, being yourself. And I'm sure there's many other words and feelings and even memories that you have, of positive or negative instances when you attempted to be authentic, or even who gets to be authentic in the workplace. And so I want to just share with you first and foremost, a lot of this, the information that I'm going to share with you comes from, I have a background and have worked with Harvard Business School. So I use a lot of their Harvard cases and the business review. And there's one particular article that I want to reference here, so that you can all, if you want to continue your learning on this, an article called The Authenticity Paradox, and another one called How Much of Your Authentic Self Should You Be Bringing to Work? And so when we talk about what is authenticity in the workplace, what we're really talking about, right? It's like the word authentic means like an original piece of art. Nothing. There is no copy. So just like yourself, there is no one else like you. Like your unique values, your unique way of being, your history, and who you are is unique to you. And the goal of this conversation is for us to have an understanding of how can we create an environment where an individual can bring their most authentic self to work. And quite honestly, authenticity has become really the gold standard for leadership. The business case for authenticity is that those leaders who can be authentic can have a higher level of connection with their employees and empower them to be their best selves. So as authenticity at work means being yourself and showing your true colors. This means not feeling like you have to be a different person or act differently from who you are at home and who you are at work. That essentially you can actually blend the two. And now more than ever, as work and home are being blended, I'm working from my home, and so many of you are. It's more important than ever that we can do that. So how can we be more authentic? So there are 5 different pillars of how we can be more authentic in the workplace, and we're going to talk about each of these. Elizabeth, I just want to make sure you can all see the screen that says, how can I be more authentic?
Yes, we can see.
Wonderful. So the first one is really establishing your core values. The next one is acting with integrity, speaking your truth tactfully, and always being kind. So what do we mean by establish your core values? Sometimes when we are at work, we can forget about what we truly care about because, it's busy. We have goals and deadlines and timelines and things that we need to do, and those that, have authority over our paycheck. But what we're really calling you to do is to really think about, what are the things that are important to you? Family, whatever is important to you, maybe getting the next raise, whatever, but at the core of who you are, in your heart of hearts, what are your core values? So if right now, if you have a pen and paper with you, you can write down, what are the top 3 things that you care about more than money? what are those things? And I would love to get some participation on the chat and hear what are some of your core values that perhaps we can really bring these forward, and we can think of some ways to showcase these at work. So for me, one of my core values is family. One of my core values is peace. I really value my peace and being a person of impact. So all the work that I do is surrounded around that. So if you could please share with me, what is one of your core values? I'll just give a second for us to do that. Family, health, faith, environment, the environment, yes. Justice, family, respect, thank you. Health, your reputation, yes, very important. Family, friends, honesty. Very good. Wonderful, thank you. Thank you so much. Accountability, integrity, compassion. All wonderful, wonderful things. And Elizabeth, I opened the chat and now I'm not able to close the chat. I don't know if you can do that on your, there's a way to do that on your end. Let's see, can I stop sharing my screen? Oh boy. Sorry guys, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Okay, I think I'm fine now. So part of being authentic is having those core values that you stand for in the forefront of how you interact with individuals, right? If honesty, family, compassion, like those things that are important to you, you can also identify in another person what is important to them. There's a point of connection there between yourself and the other person, because quite honestly, when we talk about authenticity, it's really relational, right? And like how are you going to present yourself with the person in front of you or with your team? How you're going to allow your team to see into you, to develop a sense of intimacy. The next pillar we want to think about of how we can be more authentic in the workplace is to act with integrity. When you do what you say you're going to do, when your thinking and your values are aligned, there is an energy that others can perceive that you are a person of integrity. When and that is part of authenticity, being able to show up, as someone said in the chat, being transparent. It's not that you're going to expose your whole self and everything that you've been through in your life and everything that's happening, but it's more of how can you present yourself in a way that your thinking and what you feel aligns, so that we can go to the next pillar, which is speaking your truth tactfully. But if we don't go to the beginning and already have our core values in place, bring them to mind, it's going to be very hard to act with integrity and to be able to speak your truth. And when we say tactfully, right, it's thinking about the context in the environment where you are going to share what you're sharing. So, for example, so one of the Harvard Business Review studies that talks about authenticity talks about the higher you are in your company's totem pole, the more authentic you get to be. So if you are president, vice president, CEO, right, it's almost like your environment allows you to just be who you want to be yourself. Like we want to hear your creativity. it's of more it's almost like of more value of for you to show who you are. When you are down in the totem pole where like you are supposed to be following certain protocols, being authentic in that sense is not looked upon very positively. So one of the other things to consider is like, where am I? Like, what is the environment that I'm in order for me to speak my truth, and like what parts of myself am I going to show? And everything that I'm telling you here is a practice. This is not a one and done, right? It's about first being mindful again of what are my values? How can I act with integrity, do the best that I can do? And then speak my truth in a way that is actually going to be listened to based on my on the position that I'm in. And any time that you're relating with another person and being your most authentic self and attempting to be your most authentic self at work, just always being kind and always being respectful, right? So some individuals have, you know, sometimes think of when I, being my authentic self is just like showing all of me. But sometimes showing certain parts of yourself may not be so kind to someone else. So being um tactful and being kind. And we know in our hearts when we're being kind. So that these are these pillars to think about when you're thinking about how to be your most authentic self at work. Some other things that you want to think about of like, how can I be my most authentic self at work is really try to see everyone that you come across as a human being rather than just a work contract. Once you have shifted your mindset, you can start to build deeper relationships, right? Because being authentic is really about building deeper, more efficient, mutually beneficial relationships with those we work with. Then we want to think about like, yeah, Claire, I want to be authentic at work, but I'm different. I'm different from others. So how is me being how is my uniqueness and my differences valuable at work? If I'm different, can I how can I be myself and how can I fit in? So to that, what I have to say is that yes, we want to definitely see us as all of us create the environment and the culture that we operate in. We want to again make sure that we see each person as a human being, as an individual, right, and not just a tool for work. We want to make sure that we are nurturing those relationships with individuals and getting to know people on a more intimate level. Um, One of the best tools that we have is to actually being able to listen to individuals instead of just hearing them, like to really listen, to let them know that we are really listening, paying attention to people's interests and their passions, and to follow up when we come across some things that may you of remind you of them, letting people know that they are valuable, and for yourself to really internalize that message for yourself, that although I am different, I am valuable. I am here for a reason, for a purpose. My unique voice is wanted. That's why you were hired. You weren't hired to be just like everybody else. And those are some internal messages that we can continue to give ourselves. The other thing you want to think about too is that you want to create some in being authentic is on creating some boundaries. Bringing your true self to work, yes, it means being vulnerable, but not everyone really deserves or needs to see all sides of your vulnerability. So it's really about putting your energy into those relationships at work that energize you and that also contribute to the work and the mission and the reason why you're there. You're and again, it's really, reminding yourselves that your uniqueness is very much a strength and not a weakness, and that by taking steps to identify also what makes you you, right, what's important to you, you can not only build your own personal brand as well, but find more meaning in life, in your success, and in your career. So one of the things that I was told that you you will all like to learn about today is really, what is the Latinx experience with authenticity in the workplace? And there is a study that was done by about 5 different banks around the Latinx experience in the workplace, and how so many Latinos felt, 74% of them actually felt that they needed to repress who they really were at work. And they felt that they could not be themselves at work, that they actually felt like they needed to whiten themselves. And so the business case for this is really, that companies with diverse leadership are more likely to improve market share and capture new markets. The human side, the human case to this is that if an individual constantly feels repressed to be themselves in an environment that doesn't allow them to be themselves, they're not going to be creative. They're going to be exhausted. They're going to be psychologically tired, and eventually they're going to want to leave. And what a big loss for any organization that spends their valuable time and resources bringing in a diverse individual into their team, to then not really put in the work to allow them to feel included.
Clara, we
And
have one question in the chat.
yes.
Could you just explain what Latinx means?
Yes. So what Latinx is individuals who identify themselves as descendants of Latinos. So for example, individuals who maybe they may not have been, this is an encompassing term for individuals who may have been born in a Latino country, to those who are descendants of those who come from a Latin country. So that includes, Latin includes all of the countries that you see in this image here on my left, including Brazil, all of South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and Mexico. And when we talk about the difference, like in Hispanics, we're talking about individuals that include Spanish-speaking individuals with a Spanish with Spanish legacy in them. So, for example, people from Spain are Hispanic, as opposed to a person like from Brazil includes, thinks of themselves, or is identified, excuse me, as a Latino. Is that clear? The person, let me see who asked the question. So it's a term that encompasses um, that those individuals. And then further, there was also in the study, which I'm happy to share with you all too, that 63% of Latinos do not feel welcome and included, and that they do not feel invited to share ideas, or they don't feel confident in their idea, that their ideas are actually going to be heard and valued. So imagine that, right? You having a group of 10 individuals in your workplace who are of Latinx descent, and they're feeling that 6 of them are feeling like, I don't feel included here, right? That's pretty bad for someone coming to work every day and feeling this way. And then these other numbers that 40% of them say that colleagues mispronounce their names, that 38% of them feel that other people are giving credit for their contributions, that they're taking the credit, and that even like individuals are telling jokes that make fun of certain ethnic or religious backgrounds. Or the big one too, that maybe individuals are thinking that maybe people at work may think that um, all Latinos come from one place when that is not the case. Um, oh, you're welcome, Mike. And so I just wanted to share these with you, because I know that part of your intention is knowing like what can we do to create a more inclusive workspace. So part of that, right, includes making sure that when you see someone who is Latino or different from the majority, including them in the conversation. If you see that they're quiet, maybe asking for their input, making sure that you are asking, how do I pronounce your name? Learning about them, right? Connecting with them on a genuine human level. And just taking the time to do that, not only because it's going to help you retain that employee, but because it's the right thing to do for someone, for another human being, to feel like they're included in a place where they spend so much of their time, which is work, right? And how good does it feel for you to be able to come to work, and have camaraderie and have relationships with individuals where you can be yourself. I want that for everybody. And I would love for you to want that for everyone that you work with as well. So how can you promote more authentic workplace? So we've talked about a lot of these, but there's just three things that I want you to keep in mind, and I would like for you to just own and tell me like which one of these maybe you might put into play in the upcoming for the rest of the year and beyond. So really showing up as your authentic self is really that baseline, like I said before, to build meaningful relationships at work. And that's what we want as human beings, to build meaningful relationships that are mutually beneficial um, in the workplace, and that are it's gonna get the work done. But this requires time and intent. It really requires work. So the three things that I want to leave you with really is really to really practice listening. Listening being that in so many times as leaders and as professionals, we do a lot of talking, right? We want to show our expertise. We want to show that we can solve the problem. But what if instead of maybe speaking so much, we actually asked the question and listened? And when I mean listening is really about like when you listen, you hear what a person says, is restating back to them what they said and asking clarifying questions. Because this is really going to allow for more understanding across differences, across cultural differences. So not just assuming that you heard what that person said, but it's like hearing, restating what was said, and then asking a clarifying question. Listening, restating, and asking a clarifying question to make sure that you're really listening to what that person is saying. The second is for you to follow up. Like if a person makes a request, or if you learn something new about a person, right? It's like really follow up with that person. Like be a genuine human being that actually cares. And it's just not about like let's get the work done, but it's like I care about you as a human being. Like how are your kids doing? Like that like kids are starting school now. If the person has a child, just following up with anything, maybe that something reminds you of someone, sending them an article, or just developing those genuine human connections are really going to allow for you to create a culture where people can come and be their authentic selves. And then lastly, instead of jumping in to maybe help someone, is around like asking, how can I help? And really listening for the how, as opposed to like maybe an idea that you may have around how you can help a person. It's like ask, how can you help? And listen for that and actually follow up. Um, all of these are just basic, genuine communication techniques that I'm giving you, but it really drives being able to be authentic, create and to create an authentic workplace, being a good human being. And so, lastly, I'm going to skip over this. That the question was, is there a difference between how different generations view authenticity in the workplace? And so, what we have found is that those individuals who baby boomers are more tend to, want to be quote unquote more professional and kind of stick to work conversations, while like our Gen X, our millennials, and Gen Y want to, they want to have a more of a personal connection and feel like they're really part of something and part of a community, and be able to bring, more of their personal selves to work. And so it's just interesting, to be mindful, and it's good to be mindful of like who, what are the different generations that are in my workplace. When we're thinking about how to bring our full authentic selves to work. And so I want to give us all a chance to, if you want to ask me some questions, but what I want to leave you with is really thinking of this idea of, in order for you to be authentic, is really one to, I'm going to go back to this slide, excuse me, establishing your own core values and really thinking through what those are, and showing those at work while acting with integrity, speaking your truth tactfully, taking into consideration your environment and the context, and always being kind. And so with that, I want to stop here, and I want to invite you, if you want to, we have left some time for questions, and I want to just share the slide with you if you wish to connect with me further and continue the conversation, or there's something that you want to work through. This is my information here, my website, and you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute call with me. And you can also find me on all social media sites and platforms. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and then I want to open it up for any questions or comments that you may have at this time.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I don't know how to start my, video.
Hmm.
I feel like if I'm going to ask a question, I should go on camera.
Thank you. How do I pronounce your name?
Jesse Siegel.
Jesse.
Thank you very much for that. It's really helpful. I'm thinking back to the slide where you quoted some facts and figures about Latinx people in workplaces who feel either not valued or even worse, disrespected in some way. And you also talked about how speaking your truth, but doing so tactfully and deciding how much of yourself you're going to share makes it, it's pretty clear that it's a personal thing. It is my responsibility to decide how much of myself I'm going to show, how to do so tactfully, and of course to always be kind. But if we do suspect, as the data seem to show, that there are Latinx folks who do feel either not valued or respected, et cetera, what should we as a company think about? What sorts of things should we be thinking about in encouraging people who might feel disrespected or like they can't be authentic to do so without pushing the burden on them exclusively? How do you, I guess the question is how to bridge that gap between personal responsibility and making sure that everyone who works here feels valued? Sort of a
Mm.
broad question, but that's what's going on in my head right now.
Yeah, and it's a great question. So I want to make sure that I understood it correctly, right? So what you're thinking, the question is, what can we do as an organization in order to make sure that Latinx and let's just include all people of color
Yeah.
in there, right? Feel respected, right, and included, without putting the burden on them, right? Is that the
Exactly.
question? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So one of the things that you can do, number one, right, is ask the question, um, ask them the question, and say, like, what can we do? You can ask, that's number one, right? That it's ask them the question. Number two, right, it's looking at also like what is it that we're not what is it that we're not doing? Like what it like in our policies, um what policies do we have in place to make sure that everyone feels included? So even like in meetings, like one thing that you can do is like if you like the data already tells us that there's individuals who are not who feel like they don't want to contribute or that they can't contribute because they're not going to be listened to. It's like solicit their ideas and actually take it into consideration. Also, making sure that your leadership includes that your leadership is diverse, because you can only do so much of that thinking without having actually lived the experience. So having individuals of color in your leadership, like you have individuals who have been there. This is all things without like putting the the burden on the people. It's really leadership, like diversifying your leadership.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anybody else? And like I said, I'm glad to continue this conversation with anybody, from away from this space. But I really hope that the message that I want to really relay here is that we are all unique and valuable. And I know that sometimes it's very hard to show your authentic self, or you don't know how much of your authentic self to show in the workplace. But it sounds to me like this organization is attempting to do their very best to create an inclusive workspace. And so if you see something, say something. It sounds like that is welcomed here. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Anything that stood out to you? You have a really quiet group.
I do
No
have a question.
Okay.
When was that study done? Like how recently?
Yeah.
And were the results different depending upon the group or the industry they looked at? I say that because we're a sales organization, right? And so is it different depending upon what industry it is?
So the study itself is called Latinos at Work: Unleashing the Power of Culture. And the industry itself, it was done across a few different industries. And I know one of them was definitely banking.
Okay.
And the study was done in 2020.
Oh, so recent,
I
okay.
believe. Yep, it's very recent. So you can, if you want to take a look, you can Google Latinos at Work, Unleashing the Power of Culture.
Okay. I was hoping it was older.
No,
I was hoping, I was like,
No.
well, maybe we've made advances with COVID.
no,
People got
Nicole.
kinder and gentler. Okay.
No, and the statistics are actually even worse for Black individuals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was hoping. You was hoping.
No, I mean, we can all do our part. We can all do
Right.
our part to change those statistics. I appreciate your comment.
But thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm actually going to look up the study.
Yeah.
I think the only thing, I'll go on camera.
Mhm.
The only thing that I would want to understand a little bit more is, because I think many times we talk about the impact of not being your authentic self, et cetera, as it relates to sex, race, country of origin, et cetera. But, and it's always in relationship to kind of how companies can be better and how we can be better as people. But I think there's also an impact on what it means for the business, and not just the perception of the business, but the ability to get real critical and important work done in environments where you cannot be your authentic self. And I would like to see a little bit more of that in our discussions, because many times it becomes more of a personal issue and how we can treat other people. And it really is even beyond that.
Absolutely, Jennifer. I completely agree with you. And my my goal here today, because so what you're talking about is like those conversations can be tailored to like who the audience, like, audiences of different colors, different like leadership only, right? Like who has the power to actually change the environments and the policies. And this talk right here is me attempting to reach everyone, right? So it's very high level, and like,
Oh
what
yeah,
can
and
we
it's not a criticism. It wasn't a criticism. It was really
I didn't take it
just
that
more
way, trust
about,
me.
yeah, it was really more just about how we can change or enhance the conversation to talk also about the impact of not being your authentic self on business and
Yes.
what the bottom line is. That was,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And the bottom line too is that those organizations that allow individual that create the hot term right now is psychologically safe environments for individuals to be themselves, drive more innovation, drive more creativity, have a higher bottom line, because people can like literally use more of their brain power because they are relaxed and they can be themselves. Um, that's essentially why the study came up, because the buying power of Latinos is so great that in order for businesses to reach that $1 trillion buying power, they need Latinos in their workplace. Like you can only reach an individual so far without you having their lived experience. And so, that's why I really appreciate Jesse's question, because it's really about like diversifying the workplace in all levels. Yeah, I appreciate your comment very much, Jennifer. Anyone else? Any comment is good. Anything you want to share with us? whatever you're thinking, someone else is thinking it too.
Hi, this is Jessie Klein. I'm just curious. There's a term that I really enjoy, and I wonder if maybe you could help better define it for me. But it's the term self-efficacy, and I think maybe just a little bit has to do with like supporting someone's self-efficacy, like help them believe in themselves. But maybe you could expand and explain a little bit more about its true definition.
So when I think of the term self-efficacy as it relates to individuals being their authentic self, I think about and in this case, like an individual of color or just anyone who may, for whatever reason, historically or situationally have been oppressed. They have internalized these messages that they are less than or that they can't accomplish something for whatever reason, trauma, it could be any reason. And so self-efficacy, right, lies around having that person identify, like, what are those things that are keeping me from believing in myself and that I can, and having confidence, right, which is the psychological belief that if you work at something, you will eventually be able to achieve it if you get, the skills and the information and the support that you need. And so that's kind of my understanding of self-efficacy. I hope that was
Thank you
helpful.
very much.
You're welcome. So it's not, when I think of it, it's not so much of like, yeah, you can do it. Just gotta work harder, but it's like we have to go deeper, right? Into looking at like, what has historically happened to this person that has kept them from thinking that they can't achieve something. Right. And like, what can we do systemically for the person or even for that group to help them be more efficient or for them to reach the goals that they want to reach and to being a full functioning happy human being. That's what I understand it to be. Any other questions or comments? Well, I guess for anyone who doesn't want to answer, I would love to know, what was one thing what's one thing that you're committing to in being more authentic? Is it being a better listener? Is it creating more meaningful connections and actually following up with someone? Yeah, like what is your one thing you're going to do? Are you going to commit to being more kind? Are you going to remember your values? Are you going to speak up more? Beautiful. Thank you. So I'm just gonna share these here aloud. Yeah, it's definitely, it's listening. Yeah, it's hard, and it's definitely hard to do. Less talking, more active listening, connect, following up. If it's quiet in a meeting, try to engage them, be more kind. Yeah, being sure, inclusivity. Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, and just like commit to one thing and see what difference that makes, especially in how you feel about coming to work, because essentially being authentic is really about feeling a sense of peace and harmony within oneself and creating that kind of environment where others can feel the same. Continue to be curious about others. Thank you, Joanne. Beautiful. Yeah, so if you can just take one piece of information, one takeaway, one action step from this conversation, around how you can show up, more fully you, and create an environment where others can do the same. And then again, if anyone wants to continue the conversation, I'm happy to do that. Right. Deep breath, everybody. Thank you again.
Well, if there's no additional questions, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. Clara, thank you so much for your perspective. And to our partners at West, thank you as well. And this will conclude today's DE&I session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.